The explosive ending to the penultimate episode of FX and Hulu's Shogun sets the stage for the epic final. Ishido is desperate to hold onto his power, and is willing to do whatever it takes to ensure that everyone bows down to his will. With the arrival of Yabushige, Blackthorn, and Mariko in Osaka, Ishido's hold on the other regents comes into question, and a delicate balance of power in Japan finally begins to topple. After 2 months of watching John Blackthorn survive in feudal Japan against all odds, Toranaga repeatedly outmaneuver his rivals, and Mariko simply being the best, it's time to learn how this story ends. In last week's episode of Shogun, Mariko single-handedly rocked Ishido's grip on Osaka by attempting to leave the city, proving she and every other lord and lady there were, in fact, hostages. Although he deftly prevented Mariko from martyring herself via seppuku, Ishido's plan to capture her failed, resulting in her death. It has been a rough few weeks for Shogun fans. Toranaga is incredibly close to his goal of becoming the ruler of Japan, but at what cost? He already lost a son, a traitorous brother, a lifelong friend, and a future Emmy winner. At this pace, Toranaga may rule over a graveyard. But the war is far from over. To anyone who hasn't spoiled the true story for themselves yet, kudos. Sure, the end of our tale is based on real historical events, the 1975 James Clavell novel, and even a Shogun miniseries from the 80s. Considering the last few episodes, I expected more in line for a spectacular ending where a ton of characters would die or perhaps someone would seek revenge for Mariko's death. However, no, this is more of an episode's conclusion, a digesting of events, and a subtly hinting to these characters' future, and Ibushige goes completely insane. First though, we are met with the visage of an elderly Blackthorn, who is groaning while laying supine on a large bed covered by a canopy. His eyes are blue and piercing due to cataracts, and he is holding Mariko's rosary in his trembling hand. His grandchildren are in awe of the Japanese combat gear Dad has on display in his rooms, including a cool samurai helmet and a katana that they note is damaged. Gazing at the sword, they pose a direct question to him: did a savage really give it to you? And it appears that Blackthorn's perspective on these individuals he has met and gotten to know over the previous few months is what drives this episode. As brutal as? Before he can respond, Ibushige yells at him to wake him up from this dream, saying, "We're still in the aftermath of the explosion here." Mariko is dead on the ground, but why is she still whole? Her engine approaches her, cradles her body in his arms, and then prays, crying first. "We commit to you your faithful servant Mariko-sama," he prays, and the loss hits home for him, as well as for us the viewers, every time he says her name. Now he is by himself. Not only has he lost his best friend, but also his interpreter, who has been his only means of access to this world. What will happen to Blackthorn now? He is aware that there has already been discussion about his value to the cause before this incident. He is met by Kiyama's men at the Osaka castle gates, who inform him in Portuguese that Yabushige, and he must now return to Eiju after the prisoners are released. He's positive he's lost. Nevertheless, he happily goes when Father Martin shows up to lead him to the ship. In the woods, they discuss Mariko and how she would have appreciated their politeness. Observe how well my boys did along. They also discuss religion, mentioning how Blackthorn prayed to a god that day, one that was neither essentially Catholic nor Protestant. This is a major turning point for these two adversaries of religion. As they converse, Blackthorn actually questions why he hasn't been attacked yet. He has on earlier forays into the jungle. But Martin informs him that Lady Maria has made arrangements. After being pardoned by Martin, Mariko struck an agreement with the church to allow Blackthorn to continue living. Thus he acts. Let's now take a moment to consider this act of kindness from Fuji and Mariko's perspective. They were all spared when their families were killed, and they were all bitter about it. They were reassured, nevertheless, that there was more to their survival, both for themselves and for the people they had lost. With that, we find out that Fuji will be becoming a nun and has been released from her consort responsibilities. We learn what Mariko thought her engine's mission was, and it most definitely wasn't returning to England. This is made abundantly evident when Yebu's boat passes by the burned-out Erasmus. That was the church's arrangement then. Was it, or was it not? It turns out that Toranaga was also involved, and he intends to trap Blackthorn into never leaving Japan by permanently repairing his shattered vessel. He benefited just as much from setting the Anjin's priceless boat on fire as did the religious guys. In relation to Yabu and his outbursts, his character is not faring well this episode. As soon as he realizes Mariko is dead, he knows he's done. He informs Ishido in a private chat at the pond that while he was okay with Mariko being caught, they hadn't intended for her to die. Ishido tells him he will become a regent as soon as Toranaga leaves, sort of like, yes, that was her own fault. Ibushige knows enough about it in this conversation to remind Ishido that the last time someone, the Teiko, was about to declare war on Toranaga, there had also been an earthquake, a bad omen, and everyone agreed to scrap the plan. There had also been a small earthquake when the council voted moments earlier to go to war with Toranaga. Ishido is unconcerned. While Ibushige is narrating this, he's standing in the garden pond, swiping at the water in an attempt to use his hands to catch imaginary catfish, which worries him a little more. Yes, Ibushige does really die in this one. It appears as though anything may happen, particularly when we witness him frantically undressing in order to jump from his boat and pleading for Anjin-sama to repeat the endearing diving instruction he shared with Toranaga in better days. However, what's the deal? Despite his desire to be consumed by angry fish or torn apart by cannons, he is condemned to boring old seppuku as punishment for his betrayal. Furthermore, Anjin cannot even second him. He most likely inquired because he is aware of how bad he is with a sword. His next choice is Toranaga, which the man agrees to. Toranaga gets to secretly divulge his plans to his dear old nemesis, almost in full, during Ibushige's last minutes spent with him on the cliffside. He doesn't tell him everything. In fact, his final remarks to him seem to be along the lines of, "Why tell the future to a dead man?" We get to see a sort of surrealistic flashback of the actual conflict, where the armies are poised for combat until Ishido learns that the hare has now bestowed his blessing on Toranaga rather than on him. Ochiba is now against him because he killed her friend. With no more credibility, Ishido is forced to give up. We can presume that all of this occurs as well, since the events in Shogun mimic the actual founding of the Tokugawa shogunate's reign and the start of Japan's Edo period. In this show too, it appears that everything turns out well for Toranaga-sama. Even though Mariko-sama would have us believe that death is unimportant in Japanese culture, we live and we die. This monolithic view of death is not presented to us. Every character has a unique connection to it. Mariko has dedicated her life to finding a purposeful end to her life, and her father's death has defined her. Meanwhile, Lady Ochiba has been on a lifelong pursuit for vengeance since her father's death. Ibushige, that tiny weirdo, has a death obsession. He studies death closely, enjoys picturing how horrible it may be, and frequently writes a new will for his scribe in case he passes away. Toranaga-sama is more interested in how death might be utilized as a political tool than he is in his own destiny. This is shown in his treatment of his own son Nagakato, as well as his devoted general Hiromatsu and subordinate Mariko. This is not to say that he doesn't honor their sacrifices and feel some sadness over their losses. Rather, he is well aware that each of these fatalities was essential to his own achievement. During his tale, Blackthorn's connection with both death and himself is changed. He tries a completely different tactic when he visits Toranaga to plead with him to stop murdering villagers in his hunt for the arsonists who set fire to the Erasmus. He knew full well who they were. This was all a ruse. He threatens to stab himself in the stomach. He says he will die in protest of Toranaga's conduct in the community, obviously taking inspiration from his love, Mariko. Here, in a reference to the first 2 episodes of the series, he acknowledges that he has been their enemy from the beginning, seeking his own self-serving objectives and planning to take advantage of them. He now wants to use his demise as a protest against the nice people in the community being harmed any further. He accepts that his life is not more significant than the lives of his fellow community members, as he has seen that death can have value. Toranaga stops him. In any case, this was all a ruse to see how committed Blackthorn was. At least in terms of how they cope to loss and sadness, Blackthorn and Fujisama both appear to have similar perspectives on death by the end of this episode. She seems completely at peace in their heartfelt talk, having discovered a new purpose as a nun. Best nun, Fujisama, Blackthorn addresses her in terrible Japanese. He gives her a little boat ride, so they can both release their loved one's remains into the water as his final act of goodwill before she departs. He gives Mariko's rosary to the water when she dumps her family's ashes into it. There's also a poignant flashback to the instant before her son passed away. Recalling Mariko's comments to her at her lowest point in life, Fuji consoles her companion as he hesitates to cast the symbol of his love into the water by saying, "Let your hands be the last to hold her." In the end, everyone may relate to Mariko's statements in some manner. That is all that is left of her. After Ochiba and her son complete her poem Leafless Branch, Toranaga receives her final poem and reads it aloud. The things she said to Blackthorn continued to haunt him in his sleep. Before leaving, Ibushige gives Omi a poem and his true thoughts, hoping that this will also connect. This speaks to legacy, which the Shogun understands well. The musical also leaves a legacy of its own through the words it conveys, which are delivered by an amazing cast and everyone engaged in its production. Ibushige's priceless expression after piercing himself with the sword. He turns to face Toranaga, clearly happy to finally understand what it's like to be dying. It's sweet. Even if we are aware that it was all a dream, it would be interesting to examine the symbolic meaning of each object in the elderly John Blackthorn's bedroom. We have to ask ourselves if Toranaga intended for Mariko and Blackthorn to fall in love. Particularly in light of the entire ship situation, it appears likely that he used their friendship for personal gain. Now, I don't suppose Mariko knew about it. Her emotions appeared sincere, and Toranaga usually doesn't divulge his plans unless a character is about to die. In many situations, he just sort of reads people's behavior accurately by getting to know them well. How do you feel? How lovely was it to see Buntaro and Blackthorn getting along there in the end? Speaking of Mariko, he assists the Anjin in removing his ship from the water. They will become friends, and I suppose have been somewhat corrected. Buntaro has no plans to do anything. That was a false impression. Still, he's a big fat loser. With Mariko gone, perhaps he can find someone else and perform better.